The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Again, as I say every week, I'm sitting here with no idea what I'm going to say. And I guess I'll just start with what I just read. And to me, it's interesting because I've always advocated for the use of marijuana as a medicine. And I just read that the DEA has decided to reschedule marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 drug. And well, it's not a legalization or a decriminalization, but it is a lessening of the policy, the stringency of the policy, and that's a positive thing for people who use marijuana as a medicine. And the reason why it's important is because a Schedule 1 drug is most potential for abuse and dependence and no medicinal qualities is what they're saying. That none of those drugs on a Schedule 1 have medicinal qualities, which is ridiculous. Marijuana has medicinal qualities, and I'm not going to get into the other ones on there because I believe they actually also have medicinal qualities. Now, there's potential for abuse with some of those, and I understand that. But the focus today was on marijuana, and it's good news because it allows for more research, and that's important. Research is the key towards more of a decriminalization or a legalization. And I just had this conversation with a potential guest about legalizing drugs and when we might see certain drugs legalized and why we might see certain drugs legalized. And unfortunately, a lot of that speculation is based upon who can make money off of it. And that's kind of ridiculous in my mind. So you sit here with a plant. It's a plant. And you can grow it in your backyard. You can grow it in your house. You can do whatever you want with it. You can grow it pretty much anywhere. It's literally a weed. And so a company is going to say they're going to patent something that grows naturally. That doesn't make sense to me. That is obviously capitalism is the way of our economy, and I get it. I understand that. But to say that someone can't have their own medicine and can't use plant medicine is ridiculous. And we can go back and forth, and I'm sure people out there are cringing at the fact that marijuana is becoming more and more acceptable and more available. But it has a ton of therapeutic qualities. And I don't think everyone should use it. I don't think everyone should use it all the time. I think that it has its place and it has its use. And I advocate for that. And to make that possible, we need to lessen, just like the DEA did today, we need to lessen the stringency on some of these drugs so we can research what their value is. You know, what the value is in LSD, what the value is in MDMA, what the value is, and it's already being shown with ketamine. It's already being shown with LSD and MDMA. But you take those and you take psilocybin and they're common sense mental health solutions, to be honest with you. And it needs to be looked into. It needs to be more prevalent and used more often. The fire service and veterans and law enforcement, ketamine is a valuable tool. And I'm hoping to get a show done in the next month or two, and it will focus on ketamine, and it will focus on what the use is and why it's so potent and why it's so important that we have it available to us. So that's one soapbox that I'm on this week, and I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to have that out there, and that news is good news. Now, if we can get states like my own, Virginia, to wake up, it'd be wonderful. You know, we have legal marijuana here. You're allowed to have recreational use marijuana, but we have no way of buying it. The only way you can buy it is you go to a dispensary with a medical card. But the Republican governor refused to sign the bill, refused to even entertain the bill to set up an arm to sell marijuana. And it wouldn't even be a perfect system because from what I've read, it will go through an ABC, like a liquor license type machine, basically. And they would sell it. But you know what? There's money to be made, and it should be an incentive. Now we should also be able to grow our own. So there's some there are definitely wrinkles in there that we all need to work out. But I'm happy to see that the tide is still turning in the favor of marijuana and in favor of some of these drugs. If you guys haven't read about it, read about the research on marijuana, read about the research on psychedelics, see what they're doing with psychedelics for mental health and PTSD. It's fascinating. It is so promising for therapy resistant quote unquote disorders. So check it out, do some research, and then make a decision. It's not for everybody. I know that, but it is for a certain part of our population. It is the one way that we can cure what's going on. The other thing I did this week is I released another set of writing on Substack. And to me, it was very personal. It was a hard one to write. And I got into talking about suicide and kind of my experience around suicide. This show was founded because in my area, and we call it the DMV, it's DC, Maryland, Virginia. So it's a kind of a tri-state area, if you will. And in that area alone, in 21, I believe, we had 5 firefighters kill themselves within a calendar year. Now, those are the 5 that were reported. Now, we all know that there's more than what's reported. Suicide, especially amongst first responders, is underreported. Every agency does that. Every locality does that. They don't want you to know how bad it is, so we underreport. Families don't want to admit that people have committed suicide. I've had backlash because I've talked about somebody's suicide, and the families come back to me and said, "Hey, we're not talking about that. Please take that off of there." Well, that's part of the problem. Actually, it might be the problem, is that we're not talking about it. So I wrote about it. And the one thing that I have to say here is that just because I do this show and it's centered on mental health and it's centered on how we treat each other and it's centered on how we treat ourselves, I don't get it right. I don't always get it right. I very rarely get it right, to be honest with you. But I learn from everything. I learn from every instance. So in that writing, and I hope you go check it out. It's on Substack. You can find it on all my links. On that, or in that writing, I discuss my experience with it. My experience with some of the very negative feelings and some leanings toward, okay, what if I did do this? Why shouldn't I? Who would miss me? Maybe I'm more dead than alive, that kind of thing. I've also talked about my experience with kind of being used as a threat, well, since you did this, I want to kill myself. And it's used as an emotional threat. But I did a little bit of that myself because I got angry and I said, maybe I'll just kill myself. And that's a ridiculous statement because I'm not going to kill myself. I never was planning to kill myself. But there's this relationship around it for me that is very weird, and it's kind of a long-standing, and I'm coming out of that, thankfully. And I'm realizing that I was responsible for a lot of that. I was responsible for making some of those feelings possible and then fostering those feelings. And it was my own behavior. And like I said, I'm not a perfect human being. Nobody is, and I never will be. But the best I can do is learn from my mistakes. And that's what I've been doing. I'm learning from my mistakes. Suicide is a very, very real problem. We all know that. And it's a very real, the old cliche, it's the ultimate solution for a momentary problem, or, whatever the saying exactly is. But I understand where minds can go when you get to that spot. And it's kind of scary because you justify that it's okay. So if you guys get a chance, go to Substack, check out that writing. Let me know what you think, and let's have a conversation about it again, because it's something that's very necessary. I like I said, I started this because of the 5 suicides in my area in a calendar year, and to me that meant we have to talk about it. If we're not talking about it, we can't put it in the open and let everybody know, hey, we all have some issues that we need to talk about. We all have traumas. We all have anxiety in some sort. We all have these feelings that we're trying to flesh out and we're trying to figure out how to deal with. And it's not easy to do that. And if you think you're alone, it's even harder to do it. And I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. We all have these feelings. That's why I write about them. That's why I talk about them. That's why I put myself out there. Listen, I'm not proud of what I wrote. I'm proud of what I wrote. I'm not proud of my actions that brought that writing about. I never will be proud of it, but I'm proud of trying to fix what's going on, or trying to fix what happened, or trying to atone for what happened, or trying to change my behavior for what happened, from what happened. So that's where I am. It's what I have to be, or it's what I have to do. So if you guys get a chance, go read, comment, share it, do whatever we need to do. Let's get this out and let's have this conversation, please, because it's too important not to talk about these things. You know, in that tagline of mine, I say your trauma is unique, but your story is universal. And that's what it is. Our stories are universal. We need everyone to know that we're all going through some shit. And this is how we get through it. This is how we recover. This is how we become stronger. And that's there it is again. There's that word, growth. We have to grow from what we do, from what we learn, from what we experience. And if we don't grow, why did we go through it? Don't waste that experience. Learn from it, grow from it, become a better human being. I'm trying to do that for myself. Welcome to episode 117 of The Things We All Carry. This week I have Jake on. Jake is from Houston, and he reached out to me on TikTok one day, and we went back and forth, and we tried to set up a call to get his basic background. And I had to admit to him in the middle of this call, I said, Jake, dude, I am so sorry, but my head is everywhere, and I can't concentrate. I'm bouncing off the walls here. Let's do this. Let's schedule a day, let's record, and I'll go in there blindly, because why not? And so that's what we did. We scheduled a day like a week later, and I said, all right, got on the phone call with him, got on the video conference with him, and I learned about his story. And you'll hear it. I'll tell you that I don't know what his story is as we're going through it. And I really didn't. I had very little idea. I knew that he was from Houston. I knew he's a fire captain. Those are the two things I knew. So as we talked, that's how I learned his story. And you'll have to pardon me if it sounds a little rough at times, but that's what it is. It's one of those things that I called a pop-up interview. I had no idea what the story was. I had no idea where it was going to go, how long it was going to take to tell, or how to help him tell his story. So he does a great job of trying to tell his story. And a little background on Jake. Like I said, he's from the Houston area. He started out as a volunteer in 2007, and he started career in 2011. So right now, he's looking at about 17 years of total service. And like I said, he's a fire captain, and he's in the Houston area. So you guys sit back, listen to this story, listen to what Jake has to say. Let me know what you think. Comment on it, share the episode, share the writing. Find me. Let's have that conversation. And you guys get out there and do something for yourselves. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry, or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoyed the show. Hit record right now. We're not starting. Don't worry. That way I don't forget to do it. Because ADHD is a son of a bitch at times. We're recording in two spots, and so we'll sit back and kind of enjoy a conversation and see where it goes.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to The Things We All Carry. Today I have Jake. Jake's out of the Houston area, and it's quickly becoming one of my favorite spots because I've talked to a number of people down in the Houston area, and some entertaining people for certain coming out of there. And I appreciate you being on, Jake. How you doing today?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I just told you I need to let the audience know that I've got dealing with some allergy shit, and so I'm sneezing and coughing, and I sound like crap. So bear with me if I interrupt by coughing or sneezing. I apologize. I'll do the best to edit that crap out of the show. In a little background for Jake, he's a fire captain, like I said, in the Houston area. He started as a volunteer in 2007, moved on to the career side in 2011. So he's looking at 17 years total right now. And what is that? What did we say? 13 right now as a career firefighter?
Yes, sir. So started taking a paycheck in 2011, but in the Houston area, there's several major players as far as career departments, and back then, all the volunteer departments hired guys Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., so the volunteers could go to work. And some of those departments wanted to have people that weren't gonna leave and go work overtime at their full-time jobs, so they started hiring guys out of the academy, and that's where I first originally started. I was one of those guys that didn't have a career job and was willing to come on for 11 bucks an hour, no benefits. And, they knew I wasn't gonna take off to go work overtime at my career job and whatnot, and then slowly those combination departments, we had some hurricanes, we had some other things happen, and they wanted people that they could guarantee would be there. They wouldn't get recalled by their career departments. So they started hiring their own guys, full time. And I was one of the original full timers where I'm at.
So you get hired by the volunteer department to be a career guy.
Originally, you're just it. So, most of the guys that work there, it's their bass boat and beer money.
Yeah,
Um,
I get it.
their full-time job covers the house, the cars, and whatnot, and their side job is I have a truck I'm building, I have a bass boat, my deer hunting money, that and, I think when I started, I think I was making $11 an hour.
Yeah,
Uh,
you recall hearing all the words that said meant firefighters in it. They're making money hand over fist as career firefighters. You hear people say that, and then you hear this was 2007 or 2011. You're making $11 an hour. Yeah, people weren't making and still aren't making a ton of money.
well, I get a good kick out of it. I always crack the joke if someone kicked my door in and said, "Give me all your money," I'd start laughing and help them look under the couches and shit.
Yeah,
But,
ask them for a loan while they're at it, right?
yeah, right. You make what I make.
Yeah,
And he's like, and younger guy, I guess the math didn't math. And I said, well, you got to understand 22% is taxes, 8% is pension. That's 30% gone. And then, you know, 7,200 a year in child support for one kid. And then I got to cover two dependents for health insurance. We're bringing home about the same. You don't have the deductions I do, but
I
you know,
I remember way back when, not way back when, but I was maybe 2.5 years in the department, and one of my coworkers was challenging the paycheck of somebody else, and he said something about how little he makes, and the guy opened up his pay stub to show him, and he goes, "No, stop right there." He goes, "I know you make more than me," and the guy says, "Why?" And Jake, he's not with our department anymore. Jake says, "Well, you've got a comma." And so it's like, well, that makes sense. If you don't have a comma, then the guy who has a comma is making more than you.
yeah. But
So
I mean, by the same token, I mean, I used to have I drive a much more economical truck now. I got one of those Briggs and Stratton powered F-150s.
yeah,
But I used to have one of them big 6.4 diesel Power Strokes,
hmm
and that was back, diesel was about the same price it is now. Man,
hmm
that hurt.
yeah, yeah.
That hurt.
Well, let's get one question out of the way real fast. What was the last song you listened to?
Ooh. Believe it or not, it was George Jones,
Okay.
the Grand Tour.
So yeah, throwing it back to old school.
Well, my phone is it's interesting. It's got everything from Tupac to George Jones to well, I got it right here. Let's see what we got. Let me look in my recently played. It won't be much longer. I'm gonna need reading glasses to see this son bitch. Let's see. Chase Matthew, Dylan Scott, Matt Mason, George Jones, David Allen Coe, Bottleneck and the Georgia Boys, Aaron Lewis. So I'm somewhere between he and Haw with a little bit of hood in there
There
somewhere.
you go.
Keith Sweat, Peter Gabriel, uh, uh, Sammy Arriaga. I really like him. He's pretty good.
That one I don't know.
So Sammy Arriaga is, I believe he's half Cuban and half uh, Mexican American, and he takes country songs and he sings like the first two verses in English, and then he flips the last two verses to Spanish.
Interesting.
So
Oh,
he does Tennessee Whiskey, Save Me, Beautiful Crazy, and then he's got some of his own songs that he's written. I FaceTime's a big thing in the fires in my station to talk to our significant others, and so I sounded like a cat getting beat with a dull rock, and I made my girlfriend cry singing one of them songs, and so I don't know if she was crying out of pain or because it made her feel good, but either way, it was fun to do. So
hey guys. I started this journey about 2 years ago and I put out a call for help. I need stories. I need people to talk to me. And there was one person that reached out to me. He was a complete stranger at the time, but he reached out to me and he said, I want to tell my story. That dude turned out to be TJ. And he has gone on to create his own podcast and his own community of firefighters and first responders. And it's called Keep the Promise. And the purpose of Keep the Promise is to create a community of resilient and well rounded firefighters. And it's done through a number of methods, but most importantly, it's done with his podcast. And so I want you to get through this episode, enjoy it, but then I want you to go find his and I want you to listen to it. I want you to download his shows and engage with him, engage with his audience, and let him know what you think. Let me know what you think about his show because I'm telling you, it's a little different from what I do, but that's perfect because you need some variety in your lives and it's well worth your time. It's a valuable asset. And so if you're looking for another show to listen to, I highly suggest Keep the Promise. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the Houston area?
yes, sir. I grew up just north of Houston. My kind of a funnier story. My parents worked for the same company and didn't know it. They met at the airport. My mother is from northern Oklahoma, like take 35 till you see a sign that says "Welcome to Kansas."
Yeah,
Take a right. You're in her hometown.
I got you.
Um, and then my father was born in Manhattan, so I don't think anyone could have figured how those two would work out. But so they met at Intercontinental, big ass airport here in Houston, and he saw her ID tag on her briefcase. So he goes, "Oh, you work for Conoco," and this is back when you could smoke in an airport. And she puts her cigarette out, and her first words were, "Yeah, what the fuck do you want?" And that was their first interaction. And then 2 years later, they got married. 2 years later, I was born, and so my dad stayed in oil and gas, and mom was a stay-at-home mom.
So then that begs the question, what was growing up like for you? How was life as you progressed through the years?
All right. Um, my dad's best friend left Conoco to start his own company. He brought my dad with him. That company is now Fortune 500, traded on New York Stock Exchange, whatever. So, um, really, both of them being business minded, my mother and my father. I didn't see my dad much. His his job was to bring home the money and build the the family, and my mother's was to take care of me because I'm the only child. And so then when I was 8, he just retired, and he's all of a sudden he's around the house, and I don't know who he is.
Right.
I would see him for Christmas, I would see him for my birthday, but beyond that, I mean, he left for work before I woke up. He got home after I went to bed, and that was it. Um, and then all of a sudden he was home, and their idea of raising a kid was give him everything he wants, and then he won't act out, which being a father myself now,
Mm.
I don't necessarily agree with. But yeah, I didn't have the silver spoon. I had the silver, the gold, the platinum, the diamond. I could pick from what I wanted. And, it, it was a really convoluted way to grow up. If you remember the Macaulay Culkin movie, Richie Rich, when
Yeah.
he becomes friends with the normal kids and they only want to be his friends because of his stuff. That is basically what happened to me. And they always wanted to hang out at my house. They always wanted to hang out with me. And then when I realized it was because I had the pool, I had the game systems, I had the pool table, I said, the hell with y'all, and I just shut myself in. Uh so then I became, kind of the rebellious teenager and whatnot. And how I ended up with the volunteer fire department, I was going to high school, and it was like 10 in the morning, and the girl I was dating was saying, "You can't be friends with so and so because you dated his sister," and blah blah blah. I walked into the principal's office 10 in the morning. I said, "I'm out of here. This is bullshit. I'm done." So I quit because I didn't want to listen to my girlfriend's bullshit, and got a job making sandwiches. And next to the sandwich shop was an ice cream shop, and they were doing a PR at the ice cream shop. I'd worked at that sandwich shop like 3 months. So the rescue truck and the pumper are out there, and there were these 2 volunteers, one blonde, one redhead. Of course, that's what caught my attention. It wasn't the truck, it was the girls.
Right.
And so I walked in to get my check and, stumbled through flirting with one of them. And um she ended up saying, "Well, why don't you join the volunteer fire department?" So I went and got my good enough diploma so I could become a volunteer, and started liking that. And then the fire academy, um, the colleges here run fire academies, the community colleges. So I started out with them at 19. I went into the fire academy at the college to get my commission.
So how long is that process? Is it a 2-year process at the community college, or is it what's the
Yeah.
deal there?
So depends on the college. I think some of them are 6 months. I think mine was, we started in August, we ended in May, and then you had like 2 weeks off, and then you went to EMT school, and then you were done in August. So,
And then that
but
gives
it
you a
was,
state certificate or what?
so you have to have uh your so you have to have a state EMS license and your certificate of completing a fire academy to become commissioned in the state of Texas.
Oh.
Well, it ain't much better. I'm sitting here spitting Copenhagen into a cup. So
Well, you're enjoying it more than my sneezing, I can tell you that. Oh. So you get the certificate from the community college, and now, as you say, you earned your commission, um, and that slides you into the volunteer program at that point, correct?
no. So we have 2 governing bodies here in Texas. We have what's called the SFFMA, and they are the State Firefighter Fire Marshals Association. They are the governing body for the volunteers. And TCFP is the governing body for professional fire departments.
Okay.
So if you have your, I'm trying to remember, um, if you have your basic TCFP, I think that makes you an advanced volunteer.
Okay.
Um, but it has to do with training hours.
Hey guys, you looking for a way that will help you be better in your career, be better in your path, be better in your job? I've got one for you. It's called Keep the Promise, and it's run by my friend TJ. TJ was one of my first guests, and he was one of the first people to step up and say, I want to share. That takes some guts. And then from here, he went and created his own show. And the product of that is Keep the Promise. You guys can find it everywhere you find this show. And then you can find it online as well. The Keep the Promise community is thriving. Go check it out, enjoy, and get out there and do something for yourselves. So you get that, and you get into the volunteer side of everything. Now, and I want
I
to,
was volunteering at the same time.
I want to I want to caution the audience, and I apologize. I didn't do this before, and we talked about me doing it before. I haven't heard his story. We had a very brief conversation. He reached out to me, and we had a I don't know, what did we have, Jake? About a 15-minute conversation one day.
Yes, sir.
And we kind of just said, you know what? No, let's just do this on a whim. Let's just record, and we'll do it like I like to call them, the pop-up interviews. And so this is kind of what this is today. And so if the audience is wondering why I don't feel, or why it sounds like I don't know what the hell is going on, is because I just don't know what the hell is going on. So we're finding this story out at the same time, basically. So now that that's out of the way, so you were volunteering as you go through the program.
Yes, sir.
And then
So
what does that change for you once you get out of the program?
I started applying at the career departments
Okay.
in the area. At the time, outside of Houston, you had, if you were willing to drive an hour in any direction, you might have had 7 to 10 places to apply. This is 2009 for a career job. If you were willing to drop everything and move up to the Dallas area, there were more agencies. But in that part of Texas, the Dallas Metroplex, if you don't have, we call it a red patch, but it's your paramedic patch. If you ain't got a red patch, you're pretty much not getting hired. Um, the Dallas Fire Department is ALS required, and a lot of the smaller communities that make up the Metroplex have followed suit. So, they require paramedics. Some of the smaller agencies in the Houston area require a paramedic. Some of the agencies, there was one department I tested for at the time. They only took the top 30 scores, but here's the caveat. I'm a firefighter EMT. I make 100.
Yeah.
I'm number one on the list. You're a firefighter paramedic. You make a 70. You're now number one. I'm number two.
Right.
So 30 paramedics just had to pass. And no matter what my score was, I was bumped off the list and I didn't move forward. So it was extremely competitive. My first fire test was about 4 months after my commission. 127 people showed up for one spot.
Yeah, that's there was a different time where people were, in some departments, thousands would show up for 20 to 30 spots, right? And like you said, 130 people showing up for one spot.
And back then, Houston is a huge department. They're in the area here, and I think they got 90 something stations, 4,000 personnel. And at the time, they had two tests. They had the commission test, so you had your license or you had experience. That was called the certified exam.
Mhm.
And then they had the non-certified, so those were your combat veterans and college graduates.
Gotcha.
They took non-certified. So I think they were holding one test a year at the time, one certified, one non-certified, and they were getting 3,000 at each test. And they
Right.
were taking 250.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different time because now a lot of departments are leaving their hiring open year round.
Yep.
And they're scratching and clawing for qualified applicants to apply. And,
Mhm.
and just like you just mentioned that test, and I know when I took my test, there was like 3,500 of us for 30 positions.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a totally different time. So you get hired on in your department in 2011, then after spending some time just volunteer.
Mhm.
So what makes you contact me and say, hey, I think I got something to say?
So I caught a couple of the snippets on TikTok. You know, I am a millennial on TikTok. I know that's hard to believe that some of us can understand technology to that facet, but I figured it out. Um, so I caught a couple of your snippets, and I think when it comes to long term being in the fire service, the people hear the short term or they're only willing to give the positives.
Hmm.
And that's something because when I'm not at my fire department, I teach at one of the colleges here in Texas. And I try to explain to these guys that these recruits um, that, I can sit here and tell you about fighting fire and cutting cars, but that's not, I mean, it happens in the fire service, but in reality, the fire service is, it's cleaning bays, it's washing rigs, it's maintaining skills. The days of the fire service, and in the Houston area, we have a whole bunch of legends, that make up the Houston Fire Department and other departments around here that are known for fighting fire, multiple fires in one day and things like that. And um, but those guys, those stations still exist, and those days do happen where you're going to catch box after box after box. But the fire service has changed, and I tell the kids, and I call them kids, but I tell the recruits that if you think this is going to be like Backdraft or Ladder 49, you can go get a refund right over yonder, because in reality, you're an EMT or a paramedic on a rolling toolbox that sometimes fights fire.
Right.
And this is not the fire service is the fire service of 2024 is not the Marine Corps. You're not gonna, it's not a cussing fighting type fire service. It's a customer service based fire service. And the civilians or the citizens, like, we want a new firehouse, we want pay raises, whatever. I mean, these are the people that are going to go to the ballot box and say yay or nay. And you need to treat them how they deserve to be treated. And so those are some of the high points I like to hit. And I think even though it is 2024, and even though mental health and things like that has come to be more popular, I think it's still taboo in a lot of firehouses, or a lot of guys are not willing to say how bad things can actually get. And so I just feel that if somebody's willing to say something or be open to answering questions, then maybe if one person listening to this conversation that you and I are having decides not to get blind drunk tonight or not to hurt themselves, that maybe my time in the fire service was worth something.
So then to that comment, what's been your experience with that mental health aspect of the fire service? Have you been on one side of that coin or the other, or did you come in with one expectation and then it's been modified because of your experience, or what is kind of your stance, or what is your experience?
So the fire service from, '07, getting in '07 and all that, that was kind of what I would, and far be it from me to be an expert, but that was the very end of kind of the cowboys down here, kind of we're going to do what we want to do, how we want to do it, you know, uh, and then it became more of a business. Um, so guys didn't talk about what bothered them. Uh, and, you made a bad call, you just dealt with it. And I remember we made a bad call, where, a child was killed in a car wreck, and, we got called in for a CISM,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting there at 18 years old, you know, and, guys are talking about they can't sleep if they've drank all night, they drank the night before, etc. And I'm kind of sitting here going, you guys are, you know, at the time, I'm sitting here going, you guys are supposed to be fired.
Right.
Bullets are supposed to bounce off you. And, over the years, you learn that's not the case. You make a couple bad calls yourself, um, and it compounds. And that's the difference. I've heard, a couple of, podcasts where they talk about the difference between combat PTSD and first responder PTSD is because you're in theater anywhere between 6 to 15 months, and then you're stateside.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the fire service or law enforcement, it's day in, day out for 20 years. Um, And then, so with things like that, I started to see the other side of it. And then becoming a father, making a pediatric arrest or a pediatric death as a father hits you differently. And then when you promote, or whether you're the senior man or whether you promote and actually get ranked, um, you start to look after the people that came after you that have less time in than you. So you start to try to take care of them as best you can. Um, Unfortunately, if people don't tell you something's wrong and you don't see it, I mean, the department issued me a lot of equipment. They didn't issue me a crystal ball. I can't see into the future.
Right. So there, I think with that little bit right there has a couple of kind of questions that come out of it. So at 18, you run this car accident where a child dies. They have a schism for you. W- What was that experience like for you? Was it something that people were active in? Is it something that you took part in yourself, or did you kind of sit back and go, "No, wait a second, let's see how this is. Let's see how this plays out, whether I contribute or not."
I mean, we were kind of all told to go.
Hmm.
Um, at the time, I still thought firemen don't show their emotion. I'm 18 years old. I've lived a upper middle class to wealthy life my whole life, and I haven't really done anything with my life at that point. And worked a couple of dead end jobs and minimum wage type jobs, and I'm a full time student, and and I'm just like, I don't talk about my emotions. I'm tougher than that. And everybody else in like, that meeting was a father. And so they all were willing to talk and all that. And, I'm focused on trying to look like the tough guy and whatnot. And so I wasn't there with the right mentality. And, but
So
great.
your career progresses, and you see a few more things. Obviously, this job, no matter if you're running fire or not, you're still seeing these calls that impact you.
Mhm.
And how do you just let all that shit pile up, or do you once you become that father and you kind of soften a little bit around the edges, and then you start to see how it affects you? What's that process like for you?
Well, um, y- y- again, with where I worked, uh, as a part timer and the other part timers that made up that department at the time, um, most of them worked for some of the larger agencies in the area, and their bad habits bleed over onto you.
Yeah.
It's their part time job. They ran 12 to 18 calls, 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
They got off. They came to their side job. They threw their feet up, threw a dip in their lip, and they don't want to do it anything.
Right.
And so trucks kind of get checked. Station is kind of taken care of. And you're like, this is the norm because these guys work for the big agencies, or if you played AAA ball and Derek Jeter got sent down, aging myself, but Derek Jeter comes down from the show and walks into the dugout or walks into the clubhouse and starts doing something, you're going to assume that's the normal way it's done because he's in the show. He's been there. And bad habits from the big agencies kind of worked their way down to us. And at 22, 23 years old, when a 40 something year old says, I ain't doing that shit, to you, that becomes normal.
Right.
And so I learned, and these guys, they come from all different agencies. Some of them are nicer than others to the guys that don't have full-time jobs. And some of them are, I'm a big time fireman. You're straight out of the academy. Stay out of my way. Speak when spoken to kind of thing. But it bleeds over into their patient care. It bled over into patient care. And these guys, like I said, they've been running 18 calls a day for 10, 12 years. And they walk into a patient's house and the customer service wasn't there. To you, that becomes acceptable because you see it from the other three guys on the pumper. That, oh, you walk in, you're like, come on, get up. And well, there's a little more to it than that. You
Yeah,
don't need to start that way.
it definitely has this opportunity to become like a institutionalized apathy, for lack of a better thought.
Yeah.
And like you said, 18 to 22-year-olds see it, and they see the salty dog from the city acting one way, and you think, okay, that's what we do.
Mhm.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so, where do you? I mean, how do you defeat that?
My district chief was my captain. So when we got our first four full timers, my current district chief was the captain. It was myself and two other people. We made up the original B shift on the ladder truck. And, I ran my mouth. I had a bad attitude, whatever, and kind of, was headed down kind of the wrong path. And, um, he he kind of pulled me aside one day. He's like, I don't know if this is for you. You're, you're kind of, you know, this isn't the right mentality. This is a customer service based business. And, I kind of did some soul searching and it didn't help that all throughout that period, I came home from work one day. My daughter's stuff is gone. Her mother's stuff is gone. I'm 22 years old. I don't really know how to handle that. Um, applying at all the career departments and getting turned down. And so I think before I got hired at this part-time job that I made my full-time job, I think I tested like 18 times between like 12 different departments or something. I was kind of getting discouraged. And it goes, if you go all the way back to the fire academy at the college, there were a couple of instructors who really took the time to get to know me. And then there were a couple that once they figured out who my father was and what he did, I remember being told, you're playing fireman, you're going to go work for your daddy.
Right.
You're just wasting time. And we used to do this one drill called shoots and ladders, or some of y'all might know it as run the rabbit, where you have the burn tower. You got ladders coming up out of every window, and either an instructor or the fastest recruit will get a 10-second head start up a ladder, and the drill does not end until somebody catches them.
Mhm.
So you got 20 something recruits chasing one person, and we're up on Division 2. I'm waiting to go down the ladder. And far be it from me, I was never a gazelle. I'm kind of that big, half German, big bone type fella. And so I get on the ladder and I'm a little whooped. And um, nobody can ever say they don't know how I feel about him because it's all over my face.
Right.
And I give him a look that was basically, if we were in a different location, this would go differently. He doesn't say anything till I'm all the way down the ladder. And then he sticks his head out the window. If you ever hard eye me again, blah, 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 blah. So I'm thinking about heading back up the ladder and I get sent home for the day by the lead instructor. And the funniest part of the whole thing is he's like, did you really just stare down so and so? And I was like, we're all instructors are referred to as chief. I said, yes, chief. And he kind of smirks and he goes, I got to send you home. Good job, but you can't do that. So pack your stuff, come back tomorrow. Okay. Kind of said it all in one breath. One part was really loud. Good job was really quiet. And then it got really loud again. So I can't let you do that. You can't disrespect the chief. Good job. But don't ever do that again. You're going home today. You know?
But then you have to ask, what lesson is taught by that? So you got sent home.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've never understood. The whole, I spent all of my 7th grade year in school suspension. So I know that sucks. But when you get sent home out of school suspension. Like, okay, you're sending me on a vacation. I don't get that.
Right.
It's different in the fire service because if I send you home, you're not getting paid. But
There's that. You're right. That is one. That's one, I guess, punishment. And on the other hand, you're kind of finished with the day anyway, right?
yeah, I mean, but I think, and that was the difference in mentality pre 2010 to now is the tougher I act, and this is something I've picked up over my years is in life, not just the fire service, but
Right.
in life, the louder I am, the less confident I am. And
Mhm.
kind of brings me to a small segue. A gentleman I know, we kind of all ran around together, and he went into the army. He was an 11 Bravo, which infantryman goes to and comes back home. Cool dude for the most part. Goes to RASP, becomes a ranger, comes back home, absolute asshole. Uh, we're going out to these country bars, but because you got two choices, you got country and western. So we're going to these country bars, and he's got starched Wranglers, which we all wear, but he's pressed his shirt and his sleeves are rolled up, and he's got his high and tight, and he's glaring at everybody, and then he's just kind of tough to be around. And then we lose track of him for like 2 years. We can't find him. Doesn't answer his phone. No social media, nothing. Well, all of a sudden, me and my buddies get a text. Hey, I'm back in town visiting my mom. Y'all want to hang out? Okay. I thought this number was gone, but whatever. So we show up at the bar. We can't find him. And this Jimmy Buffett, Sammy Hagar looking some bitch stands up, longer hair, full beard, board shorts and sandals. And it's him. He's gone through selection and he's with an ODA team now. And totally chill dude, relaxed, quiet, calm, polite. And we were sitting talking and everyone's cutting up. And I look over and I'm like, what happened to you? Because I mean, he's chill. He's just sitting there.
Right.
And I looked at him and he goes, well, I don't have to act tough when I know I'm the toughest motherfucker in the room.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. And so I've noticed that in the fire service. I've been blessed to meet some great guys who you know, they sit at the table in the firehouse, they drink their coffee. You talk to them, they will talk to you. They'll cut up with you, but they never tell you about them. And I remember reading a line of duty death, a NIOSH report on a Houston captain uh, who passed away. And this guy that was totally chill, friendly to everybody. I find out that I'm reading the NIOSH. He was a probationary fireman on his way to the station for work and ended up involved in the rescue or attempted rescue. And you never would have known
Right.
talking to this guy that he, you know, was willing to do that. Or um, some of these guys that I talk to at the station, you'll never guess what they're capable of. And then you see them in their dress uniform and they look like General Patton. You don't realize they've been decorated that much and they never talk about
Well, I think it goes back to something I've said a few times. And if you hear someone tell you that they're an alpha, they're probably not.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and in Texas, we have a saying, we call it big dog, little dog. When you knock on the door, the little dog is the one that runs up to the door and barks and yelps and lets you know how big they are. You look through the window, the big dog just kind of looks at the front door
Right.
and lets you decide if you're going to fuck around or find out.
There you go. That's the more graphic way to put it, and I like it. Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can.
While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show. So, again, how do you start to make the change? Because
Someone's got to.
you make a change, right? You've already started to make a change in your mind from that old school mentality to what you think is going to work for you in the future or for those coming up after you.
So the best way I heard it was every man becomes their father. They
Okay.
either become a mirror image of their father in homage to him, and because they had a good father, or they become the direct opposite in
Mhm.
spite of their father.
Right.
So I applied that to being in the fire service. I knew when I was new in the fire station, at the time a part-time employee, these guys that worked for the big agencies, they would just hammer you and give you crap and razz you and all this. And I remember, this definitely not the most manly moment of my time, but 7 a.m., get off work, jump in my truck, make sure everybody that's leaving has left, make sure everybody that's coming on duty is in the firehouse. And can't do nothing right. I'm getting told everything from fuck you to good morning,
Mhm.
11 different times. And maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I should go work for my dad. And, I stuck with it. And I ended up with some guys that, one gentleman in particular, I was going through driver operator class because that's a separate certification here in Texas.
Mhm.
And I've got my textbook with all the notes, all the pump pressures. And this one gentleman who worked with us, bad attitude, nobody liked him. And he plays into that still to this day. If there's a crowd, you get him by himself, he's a good guy.
Right.
So I'm coming in for a night shift. It's 5 p.m. I walk in, backpack on my shoulders, textbook in my hand, and he's out there in the truck bay, and called him by name. And he's like, "What's that book?" I said, "Well, I'm learning how to pump trucks and drive trucks." Bear in mind, I have a good enough diploma. That's it. With about a fifth grade math education.
Right.
And at the time, he drove his full time job. He drove a pumper down in Houston. And he takes my textbook and he flips it open. He kind of thumbs through it, and it's an IFSTA driver operator textbook. And he goes, "This book is going to get you fucking killed." And he takes it, wings it across the truck bay. I've got notes and pins going everywhere. Keep in mind, this man's reputation is that he's just a rip-roaring prick. And he spent 3 hours in that truck bay, me and him, you know, and in the most polite language possible. Fuck your total discharge pressure. Focus on your individual lines and your residual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everything about pumping. And, he gave me the little HFD wallet card that he had. He said, "Go make a photocopy of this." And, I covered it in clear packing tape because we didn't have a laminator. So I covered it in clear packing tape. I made some redneck laminate, and I carried that thing for years. And he's like, "This is how you pump. This is how you stage your truck. This is this. This is that. Understand." And I'll never forget. And it's something I tell people is there's a difference between an engineer and a driver. A driver gets you where you're going and gets you water, but an engineer is humping bottles, throwing ladders, carrying tools. They're running like a rented mule for the first 10 to 20 minutes of the fire. And, you know, he still to this day, I'll see him at one of the stations. He still works with us part time, and I'll see him. And if there's a crowd around, he'll give me shit. But if it's just me and him, I'll ask how his kids are doing. We'll talk, you know, baseball, money, we'll talk everything. But he's still got to play his role as the department badass. And, you know, it is what it is. And I take it for what it is. I'm not going to sit there and point at my chest and say, I got a gold badge. You can't do that anymore. That's because if that's my answer to everything, then I'm not confident in myself.
Right. And so I guess does that give you license once you see that this old salty dog can then have a moment of humanity with somebody? Does that then give you license to turn around and do that to others? Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount and I appreciate all of you. I have one request though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
This was my circling back to your father. You either mimic your father or you are direct opposite in spite of him. So I take people like him and I take things from each person. And I took from him the one-on-one teaching. I took from this guy the mentoring. I took from this guy being humble, and et cetera. So, one thing I did when I started, I transferred stations. Um, it's tradition here, and I'm sure in most firehouses, your officers plate first, then your senior man, all the way down to your rookies. They get their food last. And it's not, there are some stations around here in the greater Houston area where the rookie has to plate last and get up first. And there's some stations where the rookie has to eat in their truck bay. He's not even allowed to eat with the company. Um, but I flipped it because if my crew walks, having two bugles on my collar doesn't do anything.
Right.
Uh, so my rookie plates first, off phase plates next. My driver, he plates next, and I plate last. I get my food last because these guys make me, they make up the crew.
Uh-huh.
And I will always say, and it threw people for a loop the first couple times, they don't work for me. And my district chief told me this. He said, I don't work, he said, you don't work for me. I'm your district chief. I work for you. You tell me what you need. It's my job to get it. And so I take what he said and I apply it to the crew I work for. And I tell them, you don't work for me. I work for you. And so the guys I work for, my company, um, I have, I have two phones. All my jobs get one phone number, family and friends get the other number. But the only people that I work with that have this phone number are the guys I work for and my direct supervisor. The fire chief still has this number that when I go on vacation, this sumbitch stays home. But the family and friends phone goes with me everywhere.
So how does this play into mental health for you as a leader and as a firefighter? How does all that experience play into it?
I think when everybody wants to say something, I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to talk about what they're struggling with, but nobody wants to be the first one to do it. Uh, because they're worried about being ostracized or ridiculed or whatever. And so, I'm just willing to do that and just be like, screw it. I'll be the first one to mention I've had bad calls. I've had bad experiences and I didn't handle it well. Um, in that way, if I say it, maybe someone else that will give somebody else the courage to discuss what's bothering them before it gets to that critical moment where they do hurt themselves or walk away from the fire service altogether. If I'm willing to just step in the breach and say, yeah, I've had mental health concerns and I handled some good, some bad,
Hmm.
then maybe it'll give somebody else that will be the final push of courage for them to say, okay, I've been there too. And they won't hurt themselves, or maybe they'll be able to stay in the fire service and they won't have to walk away.
Your crew, what do you have for a crew right now? I know you're an engine captain, so do you have 3 or 4 people on your crew with you?
We're supposed to ride a crew of 4. Um, one of the guys that I work for is a swing man, so if we have a manpower deficiency on another apparatus, he can drop down and go to another station. But we're supposed to have 4. It's myself and a driver operator, and then a first line and a plugman.
And so, how do you approach each day with those guys? How do you make sure that they know what's going on with them matters? Other than I understand the meal thing and the phone, but like, what are conversations like? What's the openness about? What's what? How are you leading by example with that?
That's a work in progress. Because I've always been, for the most part, I keep stuff to myself about myself. This is why this is the work in progress, opening up. Um, but if I know, or I try to seek out spouses' names, kids' names, things like that. My my probationary fireman that works at the station with me now came from a large career department in the Houston area. And before that, he was with a career department in Louisiana, and he was raised in Louisiana. So I always ask, did you, on your 4 days off, did you go back to see your folks, et cetera, et cetera? Um, you know, the gentleman that drives the engine, um, I check in on him, his kids, his family. My senior guy, I ask about his kids. He's apparently a ranked, I don't know if it's state national, but he's a ranked bowling competitor. So I always ask how that's going. Did he have any tournaments, things like that. But I don't ask it with one of these in front of me, my cell phone, and I don't ask it while I'm putting in the daily roster. I make sure to look him in the eye and try to talk to him. I also try to make myself available. I don't hang out in the captain's office. I don't hang out in my dorm room. I'm in the day room or on the apparatus floor where I'm findable, uh, and whatnot. And I always running around calling your probationary firefighter probie or rookie or boot. I didn't appreciate it. I understand it's tradition, but I always call him by his name. He came to the station, and his first day, and luckily we're an older crew. I'm 35. The, the apparatus operator, he's 51. Um, so the the probationary firefighter, he comes in the firehouse and he's used to the big city where, you know, be seen, not heard, bust your ass. That's their mentality. And so we walk up to him and I said, hey, what's your name? And first name, last name, sir. And I'm like, Jesus. Okay. Well, and tell him my name and whatnot. And engineer introduces himself and we're like, are you on a diet? Are you on paleo, CrossFit, whatever? No, sir. Okay, shit. All right. Did you bring your bedding? Yes, sir. Okay. Do you need, you know, deodorant, ass wipes? So, you know, do we need to go to the store and get you stuff? And after about 2 hours, if this man would have had a penny stuck up his ass, Abe Lincoln would have been screaming. Um, he finally relaxes and he's like, y'all are compassionate. And I told him, I said, look, if you're good enough to die alongside, you're good enough to drink a beer with, you're good enough to be a human being too. Like, I gain nothing and you gain nothing by treating you bad.
Right.
And there's tradition there, you know, I understand that, but what well, let's go into the psychological aspect. I'm supposed to treat you like crap, go out of my way to treat you like crap. You're supposed to have me treat you like crap around the firehouse, and then all of a sudden on a call, we're supposed to get along. That's paradoxical. That doesn't function.
Right.
And so that is why I treat the people I work with like humans.
It it makes a huge difference in people's lives. I can tell you that. You know,
You know, and
it and your department. I know it's the Houston area. How large is your actual department?
4 houses, about 110 members covering 26 miles.
Does that start to get out? Does that start to, you know, in a good way, infect the other houses and the other crews?
Everybody's their own person. So we've got some captains that are formerly of big agencies that are very strict and very rigid. We've got some captains like myself that came up through that agency and they developed their own styles. Our district chiefs couldn't be more different. One of them was with the big agency in the area for 20 some odd years. Uh, One of them eats, sleeps, and breathes fire. Uh, it's on his Facebook, it's on his TikTok, it's on everything. And then the other one is a former fire marshal paramedic. And so the three district chiefs all have three different operational styles. Some of them are mentors and they're coaches, and some of them will have all these different reciprocation styles and reception styles as well. There's some people that we've got people that were in the army, people that were in the Marines, that if you scream at them, they receive it because they revert back to that. And then there's other people that were born and raised in the rougher neighborhoods in the city, and you bow up at them, your rank doesn't matter. They'll square up with you.
Right.
And so, and I think that I feel that I took the time to try to get to know each individual person that I've worked for as best I could.
And that makes it, I mean, it makes a difference in how your crews respond to you. Have you found that?
Positively and negatively. I've worked we the smaller departments in the Houston area, they share a lot of people.
Hmm.
So they'll work full-time here, part-time there, or they'll flip-flop. They used to be full-time here, they switch, they drop down to part-time and they go over full-time over here. So some of these guys, especially your younger guys, we call them 220s. I'm sure that's a national term now.
Yeah.
They've been in two, they act like they've been in 20.
Yep.
A lot of them want to do this hard charging Stephen McCaffrey bullshit. Um, and they may or may not like how I do things, or they may prefer someone who does something another way. But, um, I've had people that wanted to work with me. I've had people that did, and that's fine. It's not going to take my birthday away. Um, you know,
So with this experiment of yours, taking what 13 years of career service and 17 years total service. What's where are you going with it? Where would you like to see it go for you as a fire captain, or if you promote as a chief or whatever whatever your goal is? Where would you like to see what you're doing with your crew? Where would you like to see that progress on a larger scale?
in a 5-year plan, I would like none of the gentlemen that I work for to work for me
Hmm.
or work on my company. I would like the 2 firefighters to be drivers, the driver to make captain. Um, I know that beyond captain, a lot of politics get involved. And I'm not a politician.
Mm-hmm.
I have a, I, I can't talk out of both sides of my mouth. So I can't sit here and know you're screwing me over and shake your hand. That's just not me. And so I know if I promoted, um, in my agency or another agency, that that would be something I couldn't betray. And
Right.
that's, if I were to district chief or whatever, and the crew needs something, but it's not coming from top side or admin or whatever, keeping my mouth shut would be very difficult. Um, if I were to get fire chief, same thing. If, if the mayor were to say the wrong thing, it would be very tough to keep my mouth shut. Um, but, and a lot of that has to do with the people that I read up on growing up. One of the guys I really liked was, being from Virginia. I'm sure you remember Richard Marcinko.
Yes. Yep.
So, um, I think that the way he handled things, while it ruffled a lot of feathers, that got the job done. And
It was definitely a certain style, and it definitely ruffled feathers. It did get the job done, and that we can debate some of that back and forth. But you're right, it did get a job done, and he tried to be crew centric, if that makes sense.
Mhm. and that was one of the things that, when I'm working at the academy, we appoint a class captain and company lieutenants, and the go-to answer, because we only have a limited amount of time, we have, for the academy, and the people that want to be officers in the academy, they submit a resume and a letter of intent. And so, the instructor cadre, we're going through it, and the ones that always get picked out are the veterans, people that have been officers in volunteer agencies. If they were a manager at Kinko's or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But the ones that I always want to make officers are the ones that are dragging ass. The ones that can't finish a platoon run.
Right.
Academically, they're not making it, or the whole class has decided they don't like this person. Because if you put them in a position where they're accountable, it has nothing to do with power. If just because you got a rank doesn't mean you have power. But it means that success or failure, if it's successful, it's due to your crew. If it's a failure, it's due to you. And I think that by taking the ones that are not cutting it academically or physically and making them be the class officers, that's going to provide an opportunity for growth. But I've been told, by the program director, if we were a 9-month career fire department academy, not a college, we would have that kind of time. We don't have that kind of time. I'm like, okay, well, that was my vote. I'm not offended. I understand, but that's my logic is, if somebody, the best way to have somebody meet the standard is make them the standard, make them uphold it. And that's something I've used in the fire station when we've had people that, I don't understand this knot. I don't understand this pump. Okay, well, and I pull out a folding chair and I sit down. I'm like, well, we're going to sit here and you're going to teach it to me until you understand it.
Right.
Because I can tell you these numbers, I can tell you how to do this, but that's what's sad is the measurement of intelligence has become the regurgitation of prescribed information upon demand. That's not intelligence, that's memorization. What I want to do is I want you to teach me this until you understand it.
So, where do you see your path as a leader with mental health in the future?
So I've spoken to my chief at my job about starting a peer review or a peer counseling. And with us being a smaller agency, I think the problem would be I don't want a guy I see day in and day out telling him all my problems. I'm drinking too much. I'm cheating on my wife or whatever the problem is. But there are so many of these 3, 4, and 5 station fire departments in the greater Houston area that if 20 to 30 guys from all of these fire departments said, yeah, I'll be peer counselors, you may get a, a person who's in the fire service, but they may not be from your department,
Right.
uh, which would, um, you may be more open to talking to them
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
because they're in the fire service, but you're not going to see them day in and day out.
Right. It gives them someone to speak to that has the experience and has a shared experience. But you're not gonna every morning or at shift change or whatever, you're not gonna have to interact.
Hmm. Exactly. And
Takes a little pressure off.
that's my objective. And you know, of course, everybody that joins, or not everybody, but a lot of people when they join the fire service, they want the white shirt and the 5 bugles, and they want to be a fire chief. I've pissed off enough people. I ain't gonna do it. I ain't gonna make it. I know that. Um, so what I was hoping to do is get a degree in therapy or counseling, and then have a patient load of first responders and veterans um, exclusively. And basically, whatever insurance, if insurance, whatever they pay me, fine. I'm not going to charge beyond that. I'll live off my pension and I'll live off of whatever insurance pays me and whatever.
And that's something that's sorely missing and thankfully is kind of that gap is kind of being filled as we speak because it's there are a number of people out there I've spoken to are saying, "Hey, this is where I want to head with this." And it is there's always going to be a need out there. And so it's a wonderful area to want to get into and train for that position. Um,
Mhm.
and you're right. It is necessary, and it's not something that we take lightly as first responders when we decide to say, "Hey, I need help."
And that's like, I follow you on TikTok and I follow Travis Housey, and I saw his 3-hour interview with Sean Ryan on the Sean Ryan show. And, I would like to go see one of his PTSD workshops. Um, he was present at the Super Sofa fire in Charleston. And he talks about his own experiences with that.
Right.
Um, and so, I'm not exactly a public speaker, especially my vernacular is not friendly enough to be on a microphone in front of a camera, in front of thousands of people. But if I can talk to someone at the station level or in an office one
Hmm.
on one and help them, that's fine.
Right.
I was last week, I was at a conference. It was some doctors, some scientists, some operators, some law enforcement, and some fire department all coming together to talk about, you know, health. And one of the things that was brought up is like physical therapy. You dislocate a shoulder, you break an arm in the fire service, you go to physical therapy. You're not throwing ladders at physical therapy. They have you take a coffee cup and put it in the cupboard 15 times.
Right.
Well, Is that something I'm going to do at the fire station? Yes. Is it something I need to be able to do on command on a fire ground? No. And so there was the fire service was saying, look, physical therapy for firefighters needs to be pulling hoses. It needs to be carrying ladders. It needs to be doing things like that. And then that's a concern when it comes to training. I was talking about training with a gentleman. He's a Dallas police officer. And I said, y'all do training. Y'all train for hostage rescue and you do all the Ricky Rambo recon shit, all the fun stuff, right? In fire service, we do the same thing. We always practice the big incident. We practice the
Uh-huh.
multi-alarm fire, but how many 10, 20, 30-year guys are putting on their gear 10 times in one day just for practice?
Right.
Or how many, I asked that officer, I said, riddle me this. How many times a day or a week do you safe and, empty and safe your weapon with a timer and see how quickly you can get it out of the holster to a final firing
Mm-hmm.
position?
Right.
You do it in the academy and then you hit the street, and we're going to focus on school shootings. We're going to focus on, you know, all the SWAT team, Ricky Recon stuff, but there's a SWAT team for that.
Right.
So unless you're on the SWAT team, why are we practicing this? Why are we practicing that? Do we need to be able to do it? Sure. But what's our day to day life? Situational awareness, knowing that it's not a two-way firing range. You're in a 360-degree realm, and then you got to keep another 360-degree realm of vertical and below you and in the subterranean as far as if someone's below you. So you got a 720-degree combat realm. And the fire service is no different. We check overhead obstructions for throwing ladders. Okay, that's good. But the reality is when you're carrying a ladder through an apartment complex, you bang into somebody's potted plant, you need to not only keep track of throwing the ladder, you need to keep track of swinging the ladder and things like that.
So you're talking about becoming a counselor of some sort. Have you done counseling for yourself?
Yes. I've done group counseling for different things. There is a psychological aspect to it and a behavioral modification part to it. So I did that. I've done one-on-one counseling, group therapy. I've done those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just did something called writing immersion therapy, which is wet therapy. So in 2019, I figured out if you touch a breaker box with wet feet, it's going to blow up on your face and it's going to hurt like shit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was when I called a mayday. That was I, I've never called a mayday before, but I called a mayday that time. And so I did the writing immersion therapy on that. And it's like a 5-week program. The first the first week you write from beginning to end. So from the moment I was dispatched to the moment I made it to the hospital.
Right.
And the next week you condense it a little bit, and it's from the moment I walked up to the building to the moment I made it to the hospital. And then the third week, it was the moment I walked in the room to the moment I made it to the ambulance. Fourth week was the moment that electrical panel blew up to the moment I made it to the ambulance. And then the fifth week, you write about how you feel and what you learned and how it affected your daily life. Um, and it's the fact that I got hurt that day doesn't bother me. Um, we got the lady out, whatever. The part that bothered me is the fire chief at the time was he kept his cards to his vest. He was a great guy. You get him one on one, he'll talk to you. Sure. He'll humanize, but he was very much I don't speak unless I have to kind of cheap. And If you crossed him, you knew about it. And so on that particular day, when I got injured, I called the Mayday. My buddy helped me up and sits me in a bench out front of this quinceanera hall. And he's like, "We got to go. We got to go." And my arm's all burnt up. And I said, "No, we've got civilians. Load them in the truck. I'm fine. And then we'll all go together." So he helps me up into the high water truck, which is an old Army deuce and a half with a light bar on it. And so we're running lights and sirens back to the firehouse. And the fire chief at the time was in his mid 50s, almost 300 pounds. And my district chief said my district chief has known the former fire chief since basically high school. And he said, "I've never seen that man run that fast, even back in high school." And we pull up to the station. I flip the door open. And in a deuce and a half, I mean, my knees are above eye level of someone standing on the ground. And I go to get out, and the fire chief, keep in mind, he's north of 50, picks my fat ass up, brings me down to the ground, puts me on the stretcher. And I don't feel bad about anything to this point. And he's loading me on the stretcher, and they're throwing the 27 buckles that make up a striker stretcher nowadays. And I look at him, and the only part that really strikes me is I've always referred to him as Chief. I talk to his wife on Facebook because he doesn't have one, and I still refer to him as Chief. And that's the only time I ever called him by his first name. And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Mike, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was apologizing for." And I've had more than one therapist say, "You got hurt. What are you apologizing for?" And to this day, 5 years, September will be five years later. I have no idea what I was apologizing for. But I looked him in the eye and said, "Mike, I'm sorry." And he looks at me and says, "The fuck you apologizing for?" Loads the stretcher, puts it in the truck, and off we went.
And so the writing therapy is what got you through that recovery?
I would say I'd kind of made my peace with it prior to the therapy. But, you know, full disclosure, the therapist needed to be certified in writing immersion therapy. Um, she needed a client that had a definitive critical moment uh, to be eligible to put them through writing therapy in order to get her certification. The first client that said they would do it was talking about their childhood in totality, which did not make them eligible. The second client turned it down, and I said, "Yeah, fine, screw it, I'll do it." And so I wrote about it. She got certified. I was able to, the first 3 to 4 weeks, it was like writing an incident report. It was just, this is what happened in
Right.
a linear fashion. I
Yeah.
did this, I did that, I got hurt, I called a mayday, we did this, we did that. And then they get to the week where you write about your emotions. And I'm like, well, shit. And that was the harder week. And it's not that it made me cry or anything, but when I do tell that story, it's not uncommon for me to tear up when I mention apologizing to the chief. Um, but yeah, that's the only time that I remember calling him by his first name, even in his absence, even when he's not around, he is still chief.
Right. So where do you think you are today in general?
I think we're all works in progress. I'm better off than I used to be. Um, you know, Prior to my divorce, uh, you know, um, 4 3-finger whiskeys off duty per
Mhm.
night was not uncommon. Um, Neither one of us figured out the forsake all others thing. Uh, but, you know, I think two good people getting married for the wrong reason. And, you know, I don't I don't deny my fault in that and whatnot, but I think a lot of that came from not being willing to self uh evaluate, self-soothe.
Right.
Um and it's perfectly okay, and this is what I'm learning and whatnot is it's perfectly okay to have a day where you don't answer the phone. You don't
Mhm.
do anything. I
Right.
mean, there's a monument and it's a rotary phone and it says when phones were tied by cables, men were free. And
Right.
I think in the fire service or just society in general, just because one of these goes off doesn't mean you have to answer it.
Right.
And so on your day off, it is okay to hang out with your family, leave the phone on the nightstand. You don't have to be on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And it's okay to take care of yourself as best you can. But if taking care of yourself is pounding down a suitcase of beer, it's probably time to talk to somebody.
I agree with you. Definitely agree with you. So, all that being said, let's get to those last two questions I have for everybody.
Okay.
What when's the last time you felt the sense of awe? When's the last time something happened that just took you by surprise or took you by just like it's just an awe. It's in there it's almost one of those things where how do you explain it? I'm not sure. You just know when you've had that sense, right?
That's a tough one. I wasn't present for it. I actually saw the video on national news, but a gentleman that had worked with me, he had been on probation with me. He I transferred shifts, and I'm sure you've seen the video. One of the departments, or some of the, there were multiple departments there, but one of the things they do is the proper video is a gentleman up on a ladder with bunker pants, no coat, no nothing. Division two apartment, balcony, fire rolling. This woman hands over a kid. He hands the kid down to this other firefighter who runs off with the kid. He comes back, hands a second kid down. He runs off, comes back. And then the mom comes over the balcony and comes down the ladder, and everybody got out. Um, But what people do you see it on Facebook and TikTok and whatever, they play the video in reverse, so it looks like he's handing the
Right.
kids up on the burning balcony. But knowing that gentleman or one of the gentlemen involved and talking to him face to face, he hasn't changed. And some people who are involved in those situations, that becomes their go-to conversation. That
Right.
becomes their "look at me" moment. Um, some of the awards that I've received or other uh, fire personnel have received, they won't talk about. There's some that I've received that they're on my wall, but I won't talk about them
Right.
because I didn't do it for me, and for. Uh, I didn't do it for the award. I didn't do it for this. I didn't do it for that. I did it because I promised to do this job, and that's it. You know. Um, and there's a gentleman, I don't know his name. He's a former SEAL, and he says he graduated buds. He got his trident, which is the biggest, heaviest insignia in the military. And he said, I got that thing and I never wore it in public. I only wore it to funerals because a professional, and we're not talking career, we're talking professional, whether you do this as a volunteer or a paid or a career guy, I really don't care. The fire's just as dangerous. The bagpipes are just as sad. It is what it is. A professional is someone who does it because they have to in order to feel worth something. It is their life's work. They
Right.
don't do it for recognition. And, you know, I don't, I have fire department ball caps. I started this interview with a ball cap on, but days off, if I'm not going around firemen, I mean, it's these Jimmy Buffett fishing shirts and blue jeans.
So
I don't need,
what about a book? What's a book you want to recommend to everybody?
well, there's all sorts of different books out there. I like The Rogue Warrior, written by Richard Marcinko.
Uh-huh.
Dennis Chalker he was a plank holder at SEAL 6. He has a good one. General Tommy Franks had a good autobiography.
Uh-huh.
Colin Powell had a couple of good autobiographies. Um, I think those are good. I think when it comes to shit, I'm gonna age myself. I think when it comes to how to be there for someone else, I believe Lonesome Dove is a good book.
All right.
Albeit that it was fiction, but how Gus and Cole and how they were there for each other and whatnot. Um, I think those are good books. I do think there's some wisdom in reading The Other Side. You can't just read things that see things from your perspective. Um, Keeping politics out of it, but I think one of the better quotes I ever heard, and it's a good way to look at life in general, is Tupac said, "Just because we're no longer friends doesn't mean you gained an enemy. I still want to see you eat. Just because you don't agree with this doesn't mean you have to agree with the opposite."
Right.
And I think that bled over into my fire service. Is I used to be, well, if they're in this neighborhood or they're in this area, they're inherently whatever, X, Y, and Z. Fact of the matter is, I've worked rural fire departments, I've worked urban fire departments. The vast majority of society, I don't care how old they are, I don't care where they're from, they want to earn enough money to keep the lights on, raise their kids, feed their family, and make it to retirement. Whether they're wealthy, whether they're not, whether they speak English, whether they don't, it doesn't matter. People are people, and they need to be treated with respect.
I think that's a perfect ending right there. People are people, and treat them with respect, because that can apply to a lot of things in this world, and especially this job. You know.
And like I said, I've worked rural departments, I've worked urban departments, and I try to tell these, when I worked rural departments, we get these younger deputies. They come in because I'm sure, same in Virginia, they know a fire station, they can get coffee, the bathroom is clean, and it's a safe place to do a report where they won't get shot. And so I told the younger deputies, especially out in these rural counties, I said, look, be respectful, be nice. You are a police officer, you are a deputy sheriff, whatever. But your closest backup's 20 to 30 minutes away. And if you smart off at the wrong citizen out here, they've got a backhoe and buckshot, and they're not scared to use it. So just be nice. And you brought up a book, and I'll bring up one last book, is Cold Zero by Christopher Whitcomb.
Okay.
And Christopher Wickham was a hostage rescue team sniper. He was at Ruby Ridge and Waco. However you feel about those situations, we all have our opinions. But before hostage rescue, he was a special agent in Missouri. And this plays right into what I'm telling you. So he's looking for a gentleman. He goes up to the house, knocks on the door. The guy's wife answers, tells her what he's wanted for. This is my name. I'm Special Agent Whitcomb. I'm looking for this gentleman, and he's wanted for this. He's not here. Okay, have a good day. About a week or a month later, I don't recall, he catches the guy and they're driving in the bureau car to jail. And the suspect that he was looking for is quoting verbatim the conversation that Agent Whitcomb had with his wife. And Agent Whitcomb looks in the rearview mirror and he says, boy, your wife has a great memory. He goes, no, I was in the kitchen with a shotgun pointed through the wall at the front door,
Right.
ready to kill you. And of course, at that point, Agent Whitcomb was more than intrigued, and he whips around and looks in the back seat and says, well, why didn't you kill me? He said, you didn't disrespect me. You just told my wife what I was wanted for. You told her your name.
Right.
That was it. You
Yeah.
didn't call me any names. You didn't run me down. So I let you live. And if you treat people with kindness, you don't know what they're going through. And the one act of kindness they may receive that day, that week, that month may be you. So I like to try to be as nice as possible and try to be polite everywhere I can, because that may be the one smile or the one hello that keeps them from pulling the trigger or keeps them from making a permanent decision to solve a temporary problem.
No, you're quite right. And I agree with that premise. Hey, listen, I've enjoyed the conversation.
Sure. Appreciate you having me on.
I will stay in touch and let you know when this one is coming out. I've got a few already recorded waiting in the wings, so it's going to be a couple of weeks at least. So be patient with me. All right.
Well, if you ever want to do a recap or revisit, or if you ever want to get a couple of us crazy bastards together and do a round table, let me know. And I enjoy talking with you, and we can see what we can make happen.
Sounds good. I'm going to go and finish up some other work and get the show ready for tomorrow, and then get to work on other ones and get this one edited as well. So hopefully you can go enjoy the rest of your day off down there in Houston.
I'm going to try to get it done. You do the same, sir.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.